Good morning, everybody. You made it to Thursday. Congratulations. And you made it to Thursday without incarcerating yourself, even better. And you made it to Thursday without dying in the cold, which is even better. And if you survived COVID like Mbulelo, you deserve the gold medal of all, a medal this big. So that's what we're handing out this morning. Line up and get yours. We are joined on a Thursday morning by the already mentioned Mbulelo Tinta. We've also got the terrific Phumi Mashigo, who is our regular Thursday person, and she's also here to co-host the Burning Platform with me a little bit later on, which of course is brought to you by Nando's. And wow, it's almost like they make news especially for the show. Hey, Phumi?
I love
like they
it.
create news just for us.
And align it to the day. Align it to the day. We love it. We love it.
They let us break the news. Well, speaking of breaking news, this is officially the statement from the JJ Zuma Foundation. Dear South Africans and the world, just in case you wondered who they were talking to, please be advised that President Zuma has decided to comply with the incarceration order. He is on his way to hand himself into Correctional Services Facility KZN. A full statement will be issued in due course. Wenzenu Zuma, it says at the bottom of that. And that was at 5 past midnight last night. So he, I think shortly before midnight, because that was when the time ran out, he handed himself over. Phumi, you were watching it live. I was in bed, but I was watching the news sort of with a half-open eye at midnight and got to sleep at like 12. I wasn't that invested, I must be honest with you. But tell us what you saw.
I eventually went to bed because, an old lady like myself, I needed my beauty sleep and I needed to be on the game this morning, on the ball, right? But I will tell you that about 5 hours ago, our very own Ivanka tweeted.
Ivanka as in Trump.
Yeah, don't you know, that's like our Dudu Zuma. Dudu Zuma Sombondla. She's like our Ivanka.
Yeah, sure. She's our Ivanka. That's a good way to look at it, actually. I hadn't thought about that before.
Oh, she's totally our Ivanka. So she tweeted a thing at about at 1 in the morning. Just spoke to @Pres JJ Zuma en route, and he's still in high spirits. He said that he hopes they still have his same overalls from Robben Island, and we laughed hard. That at least he won't struggle with Afrikaans this time. We salute you, Dad. Mandela.
Mandela.
Oh wow! And Edward Zuma, who said that he would lie down in front of the Caspers as they came to take his father away. What did he say?
Well, the Caspers never came to take his father away. His father left with his own convoy of security. Because remember, the security guards that look after Zuma work for us. They don't work for their family.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So they thought. All right, so he's in jail now? He's in escort. He's in jail in escort or something, right?
Correctional services. I think Eshowe. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't have any inside info here. But if you want to see a little bit of video of the convoy leaving Nkandla and heading to the jail, then you're in luck, because this morning we have this fresh video for you. You want to see it? You can't really see. I mean, it's not like you could tell what's going on. They're all black cars, and you can't see who's inside.
It's dark. It's dark because there are no street lights.
Exactly. But here's the video in case you want to see it. I've got to ask this. These are his supporters, and he's driving past them like he wants to kill them. Like, you don't drive that fast past people who are standing on the side of the road. I saw the same thing with the Zulu King's funeral a while ago. It's like you've got these pumped up security people, and you've got the genuine fans, the ordinary people on the ground who are hanging around outside, and they take their life in their hands, because these guys in these cars, they go past at speed, man. They'll drive right over your foot if you're lucky, and over the rest of you if you're not lucky. Don't seem to care about people at all.
You know what's perverse is that those people, mostly, I mean, I would imagine that area is rural. Is those are poor people? What do they see in this guy living in a castle? And his charisma is incredible. It is such a perverse scene, actually. If you watch it like that, you know.
Is it though? Because you haven't guys like him throughout history. I mean, you'd had
sure.
It
doesn't make it less perverse.
Medieval Europe doing the same thing. There goes the Lord. Let's all stand outside like good peasants and clap. This is what happens.
We love toxic leaders.
We do. We fall in love with them. Look at Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, and
we love toxic leaders.
People love those guys. And Jacob Zuma's got a mythology around him now, which you've got to give him credit for. You can hate the guy, and I've said this from the start. Phumi and I have got this this love-hate relationship. Pums, I'm not gonna assume things about you. If you think they're untrue, just correct me where I'm wrong. But for me, I have this love-hate thing with Jacob Zuma. Like, I partly love the guy because he may be crooked and wretched and a terrible person deep down inside. But then which politicians aren't? And there's something about him that's kind of authentic, even though he's all of those things. I feel like you know what you're dealing with Jacob Zuma,
You feel like you know. I feel like we don't know what we're dealing with Jacob Zuma. We never know what we're dealing with. Yeah, we never know what we're dealing with, and that's part of his allure. He's always going to surprise you with something.
Well, I loved Becky Taylor. Now, see if you can. If you love Jacob Zuma, then try and figure out for me what the hell's going on here. Just try to make sense. This is only 25, 30 seconds maximum. It's Becky Taylor talking about how long they have to make the decision on whether they're going to arrest him or not. And he's not good with numbers either, but just try and figure out what Becky's actually saying here, because this is easily one of the most confusing things ever said in a news clip.
We're given the timeline of Wednesday, 12 midnight. So actually our 3 days start at 12 midnight. We out of 72 days, we still have got a lot of hours. In between, there will be a court tomorrow. That would be day after our day, and will be a day after. It's before and after. So we don't have crisis of time.
Crisis of time, but we definitely have a crisis of being able to explain ourselves properly.
I've never understood this. By the way, obviously there's this thing that English is a sign of intelligence. It's not.
No.
People should speak in their own language. In South Africa, we have always speak in your own language.
Mara, please. This guy doesn't, even if you let him speak in, you could let him speak in tongues and he wouldn't make any sense.
No, the problem is he'd speak Vital because he's a criminal.
Do you understand what he said? The
No.
only response to that is Angaz, right?
No, guys.
What's going on there? Like, I don't understand the dude. And then to make matters worse, you've got to think about it this way. If Jacob Zuma hadn't handed himself over last night and he hadn't done what he was supposed to do according to the law, would Bheki Cele have acted? Because if there's anybody in this country who thinks that we're living in a feudal system, and he might not be wrong, by the way, that we're living in a feudal system, it's Bheki. He really does. Remember, he went and had tea with Jacob Zuma like a good serf, like a good apparatchik. He went and sat there in Mandela and had tea with him not so long ago. And he respects the hierarchy. He knows where he belongs in the hierarchy.
I mean, and we also have such short memories in this country. We forget that Jacob Zuma was also the president who fired Bheki Cele.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, just like, there's so much going on, guys. There's so much going on.
But
did Edward Zuma say the clock must untick itself? Did he say that? Because this is the quote that's been floating for hours now. Did he really say? I think a journalist said to him, the clock is ticking, because earlier in the night, I don't know if you saw any of the videos of him with his traditional weapon. Patrolling at the gate. Yeah, Edward was patrolling at the gate with his stick. And one of the journalists asked him that the clock is ticking. And he said it must untick itself.
If that's true, that's a great quote.
We're having the full experience. I think last night was a lot like New Year's Eve. Everybody waiting for midnight.
Yeah.
And fireworks.
And even if there's a curfew for the rest of us, not so much for certain people. There definitely are two sets of rules in this country. However, if you're connected enough to the ANC, no rules apply to you.
For sure.
If you are,
how long do you think it'll take us?
Mortals, you just have to go to jail. How long do you think it'll take us?
How long do you think it'll take us to finally take a Scandinavian approach to politicians? Because actually we could automate about 95% of what politicians do. We don't need 95. We don't need Begicele, actually. We could automate their functions.
Not even Phumi and I are convinced that system would work. It's just you.
No. I mean, Canada has, I think, 90% less in terms of numbers, in terms of ministry. That works. And they're a massive country. Politicians are useless. They're actually performing roles an app could do.
Yes.
You don't need the people. None of their roles. I could get a spreadsheet programmed tomorrow to do their functions.
But I'm telling you, it's never in our lifetimes going to happen. Pipe dream.
I mean, I already view them that way, which is why I'm not hugely invested.
You millennials with your dreams of how things
with
could
your
work
apps.
better.
With your apps.
It's not just you millennials, it's you and Helen Ziller. You people who believe in the capable state. Good luck to you. I don't believe that. I think you and Helen are in the same category.
I don't believe in the capable state. I'm saying the opposite, is that the politicians are useless. And smart countries know this, which is why if you look at cabinets in countries that work, they are tiny.
You and Helen believe in smart countries. I say governments everywhere are just riddled with this shit. Some of them are worse than others, obviously. We can't say they're all the same amount of shit. Oh. But you actually think that if we got the right systems in place and we had the right kind of people with the right sort of qualities, skills, and temperaments, that it might work? That's exactly Helen's argument. That's what she said.
No, look at automate.
Look at Singapore. Look at Denmark. That's what she says.
No, for me in admin, people are the worst at admin. Automate it. We need 99% less people and just automate it. It works.
The issue with automation of anything, the issue with the automation of everything is usually not the application, it's the user. The user is quite often the problem in those situations. And we have 60 million users that we'd have to worry about. So I'm not sure about that.
Well, Pumi's right, but there's also this old saying that you get the government you deserve as a country. And really, do we deserve better? I sometimes think because I do love this country. I do love living here. There's a reason I'm here. I'm here by choice. I'm not here because I have no options. I'm not one of those people who's going to sit and, I'd rather be somewhere else. I'm not. I'd rather be here. I love this place. But I'm very realistic about the fact that we are not a nation that deserves a whole lot more than we get, because we make terrible decisions on an individual level and as a nation. And we must now reap the whirlwind, and we choose bad leaders. And I say we collectively here, because obviously there are lots of people who are not involved in making sure that people like Jacob Zuma rise to the top. But I remember Polokwane all those years ago after Thabo Mbeki had centralized the ANC under his control. And I remember saying, I prefer this idea of Jacob Zuma because Thabo is an egomaniac and he's got his bureaucracy around.
Oh, Gareth, I was there, and I remember saying to you the problem with populist leaders.
Mm-hmm. And you were right.
Boga
So you were right. I was wrong. So I got the leader I deserved in some way. So we all did. And now we're here a couple of years later, and the guy's in jail. But he's not in jail for all the things he actually did to us. He's only in jail because he didn't listen to the court. And this is the judiciary flexing their muscle, and it's right that they do. But even though they say the law is applied equally here, and that's why he's in jail, it really hasn't. And we've all got to be very realistic.
And that right there, he did not listen to a court order. Mm-hmm. As everybody signing off their letters when Zenu Zuma. That's what he did.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the things. I don't want us to. I don't want us to blow our load before
exhaust ourselves.
Yeah, we've got some really cool guests on the Burning Platform later on, who I'm very excited to have on. New people who we haven't had on the show before, and who have lots of interesting things to tell us about their own understanding of what madness and nutcase behavior is going on around us. There's also lots of other cool stuff to come. We want to hear from you this morning. And a couple of the comments. Sisi Kubega says, "It is true. We saw the video. The journalist also asked him, 'Where is Zuma?' And Edward said, 'Zuma is in South Africa.'" So, Sisi, the clock will untick itself. This is a true statement.
That's awesome.
I agree more with Gareth, says Eleutherius. State is not capable and has no place ruling over our day-to-day lives. Well, I mean, if we're going to get into this discussion, and I don't want to, but the smaller you make things, Mbulelo, you are right. The smaller you make things, the better. But also, not just smaller, the more local you make things. And Phumi, I know this is your language too, because if you know who your MP is for your area, if you know who your municipal councillors are, if you know who your municipal mayor is, if you know who your ward councillor is, those are actually the people whose indecision or bad decisions or good decisions affect your life positively or negatively. And those are the people who should have the most power. And I don't mean power as in the ability to terrorize the citizenry. I mean power as in the ability to make decisions for the good of their own communities, because they're also close to, the people. And those are the people who are most responsive to the people, because the people know they live among them, right? So you can actually go to their house and complain if they're not doing their job. And they're in certain neighborhoods, they're on these WhatsApp groups. I'm not on any of those WhatsApp groups, but I know people who are.
So we've got a fantastic lady here. I'm in Ward 88, and we've got an incredible lady. Like, she's always on the ball. She's on the WhatsApp group. She's on the Facebook page. Always.
What's her name?
Like,
we always say horrible things about bad politicians. Let's say something nice about this.
So, I don't know if she's a politician, but I definitely think she's like a counselor of some sort.
Awesome.
And her name is Felicity. Let me see. I'm going to find her name. I'll find her name. So her name is Felicity. Yeah. Felicity is fantastic. I mean, when that substation goes off, we all get a WhatsApp telling us about it. Please send, then she sends a message to the WhatsApp group that says, please report, everybody, just report it to Joe McWater so that they get all of the reference numbers. And a couple of weeks ago, they sent out a message. She and two other people had organized ventilators.
Oh, wow. That's your local councillor, huh? That's amazing.
And just letting everybody know that as the third wave is here and people are running out of, you can send a message to this number and there'll be somebody that can, depending on availability, they'll be able to come over to give you, I was just like, look at you, girls.
Listen,
out here making it happen.
There are a couple of things that we neglected in all the Zuma news to say. And we'll talk about England and how they broke Twitter with their victory last night. But first of all, happy birthday to you, because, again, Jacob Zuma is stealing your thunder.
Upstaging me.
It's your birthday today, and I'm sure that you're going to make a huge fuss in level 4 lockdown. You're going to have a huge party with all your friends.
With lots of champopo flowing.
Yeah, it's basically you and your son celebrating your birthday, right?
The small cupcake.
But happy birthday to you. What's the latest from your folks in Soweto? What are they up to? How are they doing?
So, they also live with my gran, my 90.
Yes, she's still going.
Septuagenarian. She is still going. So they like in bubble wrap. We don't go there often. So they're hanging out, and thank God my parents have finally got solar, because in Pimville they don't have. In Pimville you can't go 48 hours without a power interruption. So, and it's quiet, So
you haven't seen them in a while then, because I haven't
seen them in 2 weeks.
My mother always says you should give her the credit on my birthday. So I'm thinking we should give your mum the credit on your birthday.
Absolutely. I think so. You must give dude, she was there from the very beginning, endured all the shit, went through the teenage years, did the homework, all of that. He was always like, he was wake up in the morning and send your mom a, hey man, look at you. Look at you. Look what you did.
Lots of messages for you, Dogozo and Urweshi and Ruth and Errol and Dogozizi and a whole lot of other people who are saying happy Pums.
Oh, I'm so excited. I love getting older. I love every year when my birthday comes. I love it.
Well, it's worth celebrating.
Getting closer and closer to those days where I have no fucks to give.
Yeah,
just
and
tell
Ruth
people
says,
off.
We used to get messages when Phumi was on from a few, just not the majority by any means. A few people who would say, "No, Pumi's back on," and not Ruth and Janine. Janine says this is true. Hey Phumi, happy birthday. Didn't like your opinions at first, but somehow you grew on me. You're the most consistent Cliff Central member. I think that's high praise.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks, Jameen. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Aperture King. Thanks, everyone.
You really are. The funniest thing, Pums, is this week was the first time I've added you on LinkedIn. Did you reply and let me in?
Facebook for old people. I will.
How long have I known you? 20 years, probably? 20 years, and you and I were never friends on LinkedIn? I feel like I've missed a beat here.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Now that connection. Let's make the connection.
Yeah. So are you
Did you just get onto LinkedIn? Did you just get onto LinkedIn?
I've been on LinkedIn, but suddenly I realized like I've got all these people on LinkedIn who are business. I don't add friends.
Connections.
And then under people who you should follow, you came up, and I was like, Jesus, am I not following you already? I felt very stupid. So,
do people actually use LinkedIn? Like
of
I've
course
got it.
You do.
Okay. And who is that? Like corporate?
Mbulelo, if you look up serious people,
yeah.
If you're gonna meet with people, you don't look up their Facebook page and see their baby pictures and their pictures of them with their friends getting drunk. You go straight to LinkedIn, and it gives you their whole employment history. It's like you get this
and who they know and people that you have in common.
Yes.
When you go into a meeting, Mbulelo, with that LinkedIn profile under your belt, you walk in there, you know, the small talk gets so much easier.
It's interesting. It's a whole different mindset. I mean, one of the biggest, this is a bit of a flex, but one of the biggest movie directors in the world, and when he was working at Cape Town Studios, I just sent him a DM on Instagram and said, hey, here's some stuff I've done. I worked with this. I'd like to come and see how you do stuff. I'm a huge fan of, I actually told him that I'm not a fan of one of the films you did. You ruined a whole trilogy. But anyway, he was cool. But anyway, I met him on Instagram. I sent him a DM, and that's how I've rolled with a few of those types of people. So it is interesting that LinkedIn is viewed that way. I've never ever met anyone who I consider important through.
Well, the funny thing is, Mbulelo, you can look up, if I type in marketing at a certain company, and I type in the company name and market, it actually brings up all the people in the company who work in marketing, the marketing director, the chief marketing officer. That's useful stuff. And
for research. Yeah.
It's not like something I check in on every day like you do with social media, and you have to with some social media stuff. But with LinkedIn, it's all business, and I don't follow people on there who are not going to be, who don't have a business purpose in my life. In other words, I'm not adding friends.
Gotcha.
And many people also do that with you, kind of. So you're going into a meeting with them, or you request a meeting, or somebody says you should meet, and they check your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. If I've got about 5 or 6 people in a meeting that I'm attending, then I check out all of them on the LinkedIn, and then I get in on that meeting with knowledge.
And it's worth the premium subscription. If you do a lot of that kind of business,
it is.
It's worth the premium subscription. We've met international connections. We've met definitely on LinkedIn, and also people that you know from the workplace that you've lost connection with. It's easy to find them on LinkedIn. Much easier to find them on LinkedIn.
Dogozo makes the point also that it's quite helpful when you're looking for a job in the corporate world. That's a very good point too. Yeah. Full Street says, happy birthday from Tokyo, Phumi.
Ooh, the land of the rising sun. Thank you.
Right.
I'm very excited about my birthday.
We've got JJ Cornish joining us just now, which is going to be very exciting. He's going to tell us about Botswana, because we were meant to talk to him on Tuesday and we couldn't connect for some reason, but he's on the show a little bit later on. We've also got the burning platform, as I mentioned, so much to talk about there. And we're spoiled for choice in terms of headlines this morning. Let me just check a couple of these headlines since it's about 6:30, and I want to give a bit of time to JJ just now. So the first thing, and we'll talk about this with Mighty Jamie in the burning platform later, is Swaziland, Eswatini, because what's going on there is absolutely horrific. And it's right across the border, man. This is not like it's happening in Haiti, where the Haiti president was assassinated. Did you see that story?
That story is.
I mean, I know Haiti's a proper basket case country, right? That is, and people always go the West. In the Western Hemisphere, Haiti is the ugly stepchild of all of those countries. I mean, you got the Dominican Republic, which is, you've got Jamaica, which is mostly, you've got Haiti, which is just, Haiti is a disaster. It's just been a mess for the longest time. And every time anything happens in that country, it's bad news. You never hear a good story with Haiti in it, ever.
Like, there are so many things happening in the world. Ethiopia, there was,
That's another thing we could talk to JJ about.
Yeah. We have to talk to JJ about that. I'd love to hear his view.
Well, listen to this. Unidentified gunmen stormed the presidential home at 1:00 in the morning. And apparently, the Prime Minister, Claude Joseph, has said that all of this has happened. He's called for calm, declared a state of emergency nationwide. Mr. Moise, who had been killed and his wife injured in an attack on their home, led one of the poorest nations in the world since 2017, but had faced widespread protests demanding his resignation. Let this be a reminder, politicians. You're never entirely safe. The nation's recent history has been plagued by coups, political instability, and widespread gang violence. First Lady Martine Moise later reportedly arrived by plane in Fort Lauderdale in Florida for treatment. There's no word on her condition. Apparently, the shooting of the president, according to Mr. Joseph, who is clearly the prime minister, he says, is a heinous, inhumane, and barbarian act. He says the attackers were foreigners who spoke English and Spanish. Haiti's official languages are Creole and French. Some reports of men dressed in black carrying high-powered weapons who may have pretended to be part of a U.S. drug enforcement operation, although no official details have been given. Addressing the nation, Mr. Joseph vowed the killers would be brought to justice and that the security situation was under control. Don't know about that. Anyway, the U.S. has been Haiti's biggest donor for the last 50 years and had a fractious relationship with some of its rulers and has carried out a number of blockades and interventions. But the U.S. said that it believed elections should go ahead this year to bring about a peaceful transfer of power. They're claiming they don't know any more than what Mr. Joseph has said. But really, Haiti is just a terrible place to live. You'd think in the Caribbean, you'd have a good life no matter where on which island you lived. But really, this is the worst one. It's half of that island of Hispaniola. The other half is the Dominican Republic. And trust me, you live on one side of that border, you're mostly going to live. On the other side of the border, you're mostly going to die. That's how it works. It really is. It's just such a contrast. So that's the one big story going on internationally, besides all the other big stories. The ANC suspended Carl Niehaus in the wake of all the stuff. Shame. Can I play you a clip quickly just to make you laugh this morning? So, especially if you speak Afrikaans, this is funny. But this was, how those automated voices come on to dictate what's on an article? So listen to this. This is Carl Niehaus in an article. Obviously, it's busy trying to say his name. But how do you pronounce the Carl Niehaus name if you are, one of these, what do you call them? I'll just play the sound for you because you don't need to actually see it.
Executive Committee has temporarily suspended its member and MK Military Veterans Association, Carl Niehaus, with immediate effect.
Carl Niehaus. So, in Afrikaans, to na is to have sex with, or in a much more pejorative way. And horse is obviously the horse. So, Niehaus that's a pretty awful way to translate Niehaus. You're dictating to your Wikipedia.
Oh God, that's hilarious.
That is good stuff.
Shame. He's been suspended. This poor man, I interviewed him not so long ago on So What Now. I think he was the second or third last episode. I don't know if you saw it, but I got this real feeling of sadness after he left the studio. He admitted at the beginning of the interview his only family is the ANC. And
since he was 19 years old, the man has been a member of this party.
I can't blame you if you choose a bad family. Most of us are born into a family and we don't have a choice. But if you choose a bad family like the ANC, it's really on you. So I did get this distinctly sad feeling when I spoke to him, though. He's a man who's mostly been wrong. He's been wrong more than he's been right, which is just so sad. And, a lot of people in the ANC hate him because they see him as like a bit of a joke. And then a lot of people who were anti-ANC, especially during the struggle years, hated him because they thought he was a traitor to, Afrikaans people and white people. But in the end, his own family turning their backs on him has had to have hurt. I mean, the guy's just, he's human like the rest of us. It's bound to hurt that he has no one to go to. And now that he's been kicked out of the ANC, they say temporarily. But that's like, that's like being disowned by your father or your mother.
Shame, hey, Carl Niehaus, guys. Carl Niehaus is
he's a bit of a joke.
There's that meme that's always making the rounds now with him standing with it. I think it was at one of the demonstrations that they had, and I think it was in the Free State, with his barbed wire all around him, and he's standing in his uniform, and he's got his head down. That is like the enduring, all-encompassing image of Carl Niehaus for most people. He's sad and alone and out on a limb all the time.
Shame.
All the time.
No, he is. He's a disaster. So he has been kicked out. Jessie Duarte made the statement. She said his utterances in Nkandla over the weekend brought the party into disrepute, and therefore they've decided to suspend his membership. Moreover, you were clad in a T-shirt bearing the ANC logo when you appeared on television. Duarte said the NEC has resolved that such conduct contravened Rule 2517 of the ANC's constitution. Well, that constitution just seems to be very convenient for certain people, others not so much.
I mean, half the people there, more than half the people there over the weekend. Like the weekend was like a festival. It's Gandla. People were out there with their dukes and their, Did you see the T-shirt with the lady with the T-shirt that had a hand on it? And then it says, hands off without the second F, Zuma.
Here it is. Hands off Zuma. Here, that's the picture.
Oh, wow.
Hands off Zuma. I think they meant off. But, they printed these in a hurry. That's all we can say. They printed them in a hurry. So let's give
Although they could be saying like Isandla Saga Zuma, as an extended sort of an extension of Zuma. I want to give them some credit. No,
what,
okay.
like in Game of Thrones, the hand of the king. That
exactly. like we are the hand.
Yeah.
Of Zuma,
Before we get to JJ, here's a guy. Here's a Jacob Zuma supporter in Durban, eThekwini, and he's a huge Zuma supporter. But I find myself kind of agreeing with this dude. Just listen to what he said. He was asked by the reporters, aren't you being irresponsible, spreading COVID-19? And he's like, are you joking? Do you see those other people walking around trying to do their day-to-day business?
How smart is this virus?
I love it. Yeah, listen, here he is.
Okay, Mr. Shezi, I hear what you're saying, but are you not concerned that a gathering like this, I see there are young and old people here, are you not concerned that it's going to contribute to a possible spread of the virus, the third wave that we are in? Are you not concerned about that?
Look, my brother, as you are looking at me, if you can turn your head and face that way, you'll see many people, hundreds of people passing by here. This is Durban. This is the economic hub of KwaZulu-Natal. Are you not concerned that those people are going to get the virus? Let us be real. Let us not create an illusion that there is a virus that is so intellect that it can understand that these people are gathering for political reason. Let me attack them. These ones are going to school. Let me leave them alone. These ones are varsity students. Let me not attack them. No, we cannot be fooled.
I love it. That I can't disagree with him, right? I mean,
he's right.
He's not wrong.
Yeah. Wait, when is the country opening back up? Sorry, before we move on.
So Cyril
We're
spoke to us
waiting.
2 weeks ago. He should be
Next
calling us out at some point saying, okay, we can go back to normal now. I see that
next week.
Just
I see
open
that
the restaurants.
Boris Johnson and the British government have said, all right, listen, guys, we've rolled out vaccines. It's more than 70 or 80% of you that have been vaccinated. Now we're going to open up the country and you must make your own decisions, which is exactly what we should do here. Say to people, you have control of your own life. You can carry on wearing a mask. You can isolate at home if you're worried about your health. You can make decisions that can put you in a position where you can defend yourself against whatever predations nature throws at you. But there are other people who need to get back to work.
And also, the vaccine isn't going to bring numbers down. People are still going to get COVID. Like, people must stop. It is not a vaccine.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're absolutely right. Well,
sorry, it's not a cure. It's not a cure.
Not a cure.
So what I've been seeing, which I find absolutely fascinating, and I wish our guys here would be quicker with the rollout. It's like in the UK, for instance, they still have high infection numbers, but because of the vaccine, the sting has been taken out of the illness for a lot of people. So they also had like 20,000 new infections recorded, but like 10 deaths.
But even on the basis of just forget the numbers about who's been infected and who hasn't and all of that stuff. The reality is you have to be able to make your own decisions. And for some people, going to work is more important than not being sick, especially if you're young and you're mostly healthy. Those people have to weigh it up. And the older people have to weigh it up too. And those of us who can work from home must try to. And those of us who have to go to work must go to work. We can't just wait forever. There's never going to be a day where we don't ever have a coronavirus patient anywhere in South Africa. That day is never going to happen. So get on with your life. And I'm impressed that it's taken, Boris and his stupid government this long to figure out that people must make their own decisions.
Texas, we must think, Texas is where they are wide open and living the best of all. They are doing it. I mean, Florida's so wide open, they can even take the Haitian first lady in and give her hospital treatment when she gets shot. That's how wide open. Yeah. No, they're just swapping saliva mouth to mouth in Florida. I've seen videos of just people having the time of their lives.
Maybe the reason that we haven't heard from Cyril is because he's still looking for his iPad. I don't know. It's ridiculous, right? Isn't it ridiculous?
Oh, wow. It's beyond ridiculous.
Oh, no.
Looking for his iPad.
Yeah, I mean, also, I don't know. They just must present us with some evidence here if this lockdown has worked. And don't tell me about injuries and people who've been drinking and got a trauma ward. That's not about the virus. That's what hospitals are for. They're there to treat people who get hurt in accidents and who do stupid stuff. That's why hospitals exist. And those people, by the way, the trauma ward is a separate thing in the hospital completely from the corona ward. Don't give me the crap that it's all the same thing.
It's okay. Breathe.
No.
I'm moving to Australia. I know that's the middle class solution. I'm moving to Australia. I mean, I love this country, but it'll be the death of me. I'm telling you. And I love my family. I don't even know what I'm going to do with my dog. What am I going to do with my dog? It costs a fortune to get those things there.
Well, you talk about that. I just think there's nothing more horrible. There's nothing that speaks more ill of your character than someone who ups and offs and leaves this country and just sends their dog to the SPCA. Yes, talk about judging someone. I'm going to judge you hard if you do that.
Horrible. What should you do? Put your dog down.
Poor doggies.
Well, I mean, you should have thought about that long ago because it doesn't exactly. You can't just fly to Australia tomorrow. In fact, I know a couple who are looking to move to Australia, and their paperwork was done, everything was sorted out, and because Australia's lockdown is so severe and they're not letting anyone in, and even if you have everything in order, they're just not taking anybody at the moment. They've had to wait for like a year, and I think it's going on 2 years at the moment. So, you've got to plan for these things. They don't just happen overnight. So if you've got an animal, plan for it. What would you do if you had a child and they said your child can't come in?
Some people might celebrate.
Yeah, that's true.
Give the child away.
Give the child to someone else.
I mean,
It's terrible.
really, it's a no-brainer.
No. Anyway, apparently Zuma's security detail now have to work in prison. They're not happy about this because they have to guard him also. Well, I don't know. How does it work?
That's ridiculous. I
Yeah.
have been wondering about that. Are they also going inside? Are they going to be with him in the cell? God,
So
That's ridiculous.
Phumi, one of our
so
friends,
many things happening here.
was in KZN the other day, and Jacob Zuma arrived to buy his new pair of spectacles. And he arrived with, I kid you not, she told me 8 people. So they cleared everyone else out of the shop, the little kiosk or whatever it was where he gets his glasses. They cleared everyone else out. And then he went in, and 8 of these big, scary security guards were standing around looking intimidating. I mean, to go and fetch your glasses, is he under that much threat? Isn't that insane?
It's our fault. It's society's fault that he thinks, a politician thinks he's that important. It's our fault. We give them far too much credit. They are useless cretins.
Yeah.
We got to get it there.
We're going to go to JJ Cornish in a moment or two. We'll speak to him about Botswana, something he was meant to tell us about the other day. But obviously, there are also pressing current affairs issues. There are stories in the news this week, which I'd like to have his thoughts on. And we'll find out what those are in just a short while. We're going to get
Sven.
to
Sven
Bones?
took his dogs to Switzerland. See?
Oh.
He took his
look at
dogs
that.
with him to Switzerland.
And how-
well done, Sven.
How did that go? Because if there is bureaucracy that I've ever encountered,
Switzerland.
listen, did I ever tell you the story? I was in Switzerland, right? Flushed my toilet after 11. They came up and warned me that we're going to have a problem here. Like, you don't flush after 11. No, real thing. We don't. And it happened the next day. They had to, like, because my mom's obviously, they had to come and have a proper conversation. Like, you're either going to have to leave or you're going to have to stick to the rules. They are. Listen.
You flush your own toilet. What are you meant to do? Leave
So what are you meant to do?
No, I was in a hotel. No, you don't flush after a certain hour. They've in this hotel, they had a rule. And I've encountered it in a few of these squarish places, but after 11, and they actually came to my room. Like, somebody must have complained.
What are you meant to do? What are you meant to do?
Yeah.
Just like not go to the loo. That's ridiculous.
That makes these prisoner of war camps look like they're more relaxed. Seriously, what's up with that? That's insane.
No, but that's the Swiss. They are some of the most ridiculous people on this planet. But hey, you said earlier, leave people to their own sort of. I'd rather have Switzerland, thank you. People need rules.
Says, it all went well, so his dogs are there with him. And then Ruth says, my friend paid 60K to take her dogs with her to Hungary 5 years ago.
Why would she move to Hungary?
Hungary's quite an interesting place, dude. I went to Hungary. I went to Budapest, and it's a really interesting city. And the Hungarians, they're very cool people, actually. They speak a language that is completely unrelated to all the languages around them in Europe. In fact, its closest relative, I think, is Finnish. They speak Magyar, and it's not, Austria on one side, they don't speak anything like German. They've got Slovakia north of them. They don't speak anything like Slovakian. They've got Bulgaria off to the right. Don't speak that. And then down to the south, they've got the Balkans, and they don't speak any of those languages. And they are, Buda and Pest are two different cities, and they're on either side of the Danube River. And
nice bridge.
There's a beautiful bridge. I mean, it's just, there are gorgeous, amazing things to be seen in that country. So don't write Hungary off if you don't listen to Mbulelo and decide to cancel your holiday if that's what you were planning.
No, go to Hungary, go to Budapest, go to the baths and get a Hungarian hunk to give you a massage. It's worth it.
Here's a very good point from McGowan, who says, what do you do if you have the squirt in Switzerland at night and you need the loo? I mean, you're not allowed to flush in that hotel, that very fancy hotel that Mbulelo stayed in?
Wow.
You might need to get permission. Can't just.
This is amazing. This is bureaucracy. This is why the EU is doomed. Corona's Boring says, in Belgium, there are different days for hanging white linen and colored linen. How?
they are such.
Oh, the Belgians
incredible.
really have nothing to do.
No, I'll tell you what they're doing. I once went to a mayonnaise festival there.
Yeah.
A mayonnaise festival. A mayonnaise festival. Yeah. Yes.
I don't know what to say about the fact that there is a mayonnaise festival or that you went to one. I'm not sure which is the one thing that's more like
When in Bruges.
My questions.
When in Bruges, I couldn't believe it. When you see a mayonnaise festival, because they take mayonnaise unbelievably seriously there. Yeah. How do you not go to I remember seeing it and looking at my friend and going, excuse me, when she told me, a what? That is where we're going immediately. So this doesn't shock me. What?
What's also fascinating is that it gets policed. Like, I can't believe they actually came to your room to tell you that, dude, you just can't do this around here. Like, the fact that it gets policed.
No, Switzerland, you know, my mother wanted to add, and Geneva is actually quite loose compared to Zurich, right? Listen, my mother wanted to add just a little bit to her place, right, when she was living there. Oh my God, you'd swear she was trading a kidney on the black market.
Yeah, forms filled 6 different forms that do the same thing. They go to different departments. I mean, Sven even admits, he says, flushing toilets in Switzerland, it only applies in old buildings and blocks of flats. But Sven, that it even applies is just, I mean, come on, that's ridiculous, right? Apparently in Switzerland also, according to Kevin, if you don't use the right trash bags, the police will come and they will take you in.
I have a story about that. So my mom my mom lived there. So I've lived this bureaucracy. She got a letter, right, from the police department to please come and see them because blah blah blah. She has this to pay, and she thought, my God, I must have done something. You know, the police don't just call you in, and she had a fine to pay for putting her recycling in the wrong thing. She didn't separate her recycling. You know, being a South African and being a rural Betty lady, what does she know about such? Yeah, no, that's a real thing. That they sent her a letter, and she was sort of subpoenaed to come to the it's mental. It's mental.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens. All right, we're just waiting to get JJ on. He was on just now, and then he disappeared again. So I don't know what's going on with him.
Yeah, we'll get a hold of him.
There he is. As at the moment we called for. Hello, JJ Cornish. It looks very exciting and dark in that room that you're in.
JJ.
Well, bonjour to you and joyeux anniversaire to those of you celebrating. I was thinking to go to Hungary, but I decided to remain here.
Let's go. Let's go.
But the fact is, I don't know which country I can go to, but if you freckle the porcelain after 11 o'clock, do you have to leave it there or go to another room? It doesn't make sense. I remember being in Switzerland and seeing a little paramilitary cop, you know, with his pants tucked into his combat boots, standing looking at a car. And he thought, by God, I'm going to find something wrong here. And he stood for minutes, and there was nothing wrong, but he thought, I will find something, you know, with paramilitary garbage disposal people. It is quite amazing. Quite amazing.
JJ, we've got quite an agenda this morning. I mean, apart from the news that's going on in South Africa with Jacob Zuma's arrest and all of that stuff, we've got some African news that we need to deal with before we get on to a little bit of interesting info about Botswana. So I'm very aware of your time here. First of all, Phumi mentioned Ethiopia. What's actually going on? What's the update on that as a part of African analysis this morning? Of course, this is brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School. Give us the latest.
And don't forget Haiti when you talk Africa, because it's that part of Africa, not in Africa. But Ethiopia, the fact is, well, I mean, I went to Haiti. I went to Haiti as part of a rescue group after the earthquake. And I went there because I never go on those kind of earthquake tourism stories. I went because I speak French. I'm able to help. And I thought I could help and talk to the children when they get their bandages done, and the women. It was the saddest thing, one of the saddest, most traumatic things I've ever done. Telling this mama she's got to come back the next day to get her bandages changed, and she didn't. And when she did, 3 days later, they had to take off a bit of her arm. And then 3 days later, because it was too sore, she came again and she lost her entire arm. I mean, it was that sort of thing. The most shocking thing I've ever done as a journalist. But let's get to Ethiopia. The fact is they've got the Security Council is today going to talk about the filling of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The Ethiopians let the Egyptians and the Sudanese know that we are going to fill that reservoir now. The two countries down, the riparian countries downstream, are saying, no, you're going to take our lifeblood away. And so that's the fact. Abiy Ahmed has grown up problems, as you know. His troops have lost the capital of Tigray. The Tigrayans have said, okay, we will have the ceasefire that you're demanding now, provided you accept our rule in Tigray. Tigray, of course, was the country, the region that had political sway over the entire country, and it's gone that way again. So Abiy Ahmed has problems with the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and with Tigray. They're saying the Tigrayans are saying, get rid of what remains of Eritreans here. We want you to understand that we're running this part of the country. Are they going to try and split? This is one of the most populous countries, second most populous country in Africa. He has really, really big problems to deal with.
JJ, closer to home, and we're going to deal with this a little bit in the Burning Platform later this morning, but Eswatini next door. I mean, what is your understanding of what's going on over there, and why are the media in general so quiet about this story?
Well, because if you report something in Eswatini, you're in stone trouble. They don't have a free media.
I'm talking about our media. In South Africa, they see, if I didn't have Twitter, I wouldn't have known about any of this.
The fact is, we don't know where King Mswati III is. He hasn't made an appearance. His daughter, who's a cabinet minister, is saying he would never leave the country. But we understand he might, in fact, be in Johannesburg. We understand he might, in fact, be in Maputo. We don't know at this time. The point is, he gave his guard a shoot to kill order to stop protests. And they did that. They shot and killed one person. And that has raised the ire again of people. And so at the end of the day, the violence continues, violence protests against the king. And they're saying, you can't carry on this way. You know, they say that he's wasteful. He's an absolute braggart. You know, you can't have 70% of your population under the poverty datum line and then drive around in a Mayberg telling them how they should be running their lives, deciding by decree. There are two absolute monarchs in Africa, King Mswati III and Mohammed VI in Morocco, and they run with the country as they see fit. Now, what the Swazis are saying is enough of this already. Now, why hasn't this has always been an underplayed story by South African standards? You know, I've been to the Institute for Security Studies to hear Swazi opponents or Swazi dissidents talking many times, and always struggled to sell the story to clients because there just doesn't seem to be an interest. Now, of course, the South African authorities themselves are very well aware of the fact that having this small little kingdom, totally enclosed kingdom, in uproar is a cesspool for the rest of us. We can't have it. But somehow or other, the media seems to hand it off, and that is a great pity, because we need to support what is happening in Swaziland.
Well, I know this is something that Mighty Jamie, who's on the Burning Platform, really cares about, but we've got 4 or 5 minutes here, JJ, and there's lots to cover in Botswana. I actually hope I hoped we could have more time. Just tell us the précis version of what we need to know about our little neighbor to the north, and what kind of a country they are.
Our little neighbor to the sort of northwest is the largest continuous multi-party democracy in Africa. And it has this idea of upmarket tourism. So when you go there, whether or not you take your dogs or whatever you choose to do, you have to pay through the nose, because you only get sort of 5-star camps. The fact is, it's also the largest diamond producer. Back in was many years ago, they formed this conglomerate with De Beers, so they have Botswana, and they have 5 diamond mines, and it was a country that was a British protectorate. Seretse Khama, the first president, he was exiled for a while, and he married Ruth Khama, a white woman, and that created a huge problem with the Brits. But Seretse Khama came in, and when they got independence back in 1966, the Tswana gave up a lot and sacrificed a great deal to protect and give succor to our liberationists who were living next door. And they even had the apartheid forces actually bomb, aerial bombard the Tswana. So we owe Botswana a debt in that regard. Now, you know, the truth is, Gareth, if you want to know what Africans think about us in South Africa, the best people to ask are first the Zambians. They don't mince words. And second, the Botswana, who will tell you the reason why we are having problems is that we don't let the wealth trickle down as they believe they have there. Now, this is a paragon, there's no doubt. It is by the per capita, the wealthiest African country, because they have just over 2 million people, and they have these diamonds. But the fact is, I've done business there. I brokered the sale of a newspaper there. And they, like any other government, they don't take criticism very well. And then, like South Africa, like Namibia, they get quite spiteful against critics. I know the newspaper I was selling, they were critical. And so what the government was, it said, okay, cool, we'll stop advertising in you, which is like saying, you know, I'll cut you off for jugular vein and see how you're going to manage after that. So we have then Festus Mogai, who came after Seretse Khama, and he was one of the winners of the Mo Ibrahim Prize for good governance. And then we have Ian Khama, the son of Seretse Khama. He was a very authoritarian man and an absolute, he was teetotal because there had been booze problems in the ruling family. No doubt about that. So he then was the guy that used to walk into the offices of functionaries and say, what is it you're doing? What do you think you're up to? What is it? Tell me what you do. How do you justify your vast salary and expenses to me? And I wonder if
Cyril's ever done that, or if Jacob Zuma ever did that.
I wouldn't have thought any of them could bear the answer they would have had. The fact is, though,
your breath.
Ian Khama then decided to hand over to Mokgweetsi Masisi, handpicked him as his leader. But then Masisi came in with policies, for example, on wildlife. Ian Khama is a wildlife fanatic, wouldn't allow any shooting of elephants, wouldn't allow any hunting. Mokgweetsi said, no, this is not good enough. These elephants are laying waste to areas, in the Thule block and that sort of thing. And so there's huge enmity between Ian Khama and Mokgweetsi Masisi. So there's political ructions. They've had one party in charge, very much like the ANC in Botswana. And there was an academic whose name was Kenneth Good, an Australian who'd lived there many years and was a great supporter and in conscience and in heart, a Tswana himself then. He then said that this system of having the leader of the ruling party becoming the president is not truly democratic. You should have a democratic vote for the president. Vote for the ruling party, vote for the president. And anything shy of that is not genuinely democratic. Well, Kenneth Good had to pack his bags and leave some years ago because, you just don't take that kind of criticism. So you can have a free and democratic government, which of course they do have, and they have good governance and rule of law. But it's how a government takes real criticism and responds to it that I think shows its mettle.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time to squeeze in on Botswana this week. But I know they'll come up again, and we'll have another magnified look at other countries in the next few episodes. It's always good to hear your insights, and because you've been to all these places and because you know the characters involved, it gives us an insight that we wouldn't just get from reading the Wikipedia page for Botswana. Thank you so much for that, JJ Cornish. Africanalysis is brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School. Au revoir, JJ. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Au revoir, bon weekend.
And for you, absolutely. And I like the way he wished Phumi bon anniversaire this morning. It is Phumi's birthday. And Phumi's spending her birthday with us. That's the kind of a person she is. We're her party this morning. So coming up in the next little while, we will have the Burning Platform, which is, of course, brought to you by Nando's. Stick around for that. Some really interesting conversations about, first of all, Eswatini, which we've kind of touched on already. What's really going on there? Because Mighty Jamie, who's been a guest on the Burning Platform before, is very fired up about Eswatini. And we're going to speak to someone inside the ANC about what they think of what's going on with Jacob Zuma. And finally, we've got someone who's in the ANC, is prepared to speak about this. I'm delighted. We'll welcome him in just a little while too. So stick around for that and a whole lot more. CliffCentral.com. It is Thursday, the 8th of July.
Coming up on Auto Central.
So I think there's three classic models in the history of South Africa. These three cars, at least in my lifetime, have been synonymous with South Africa. The first one being the Toyota Quantum, everyone's favorite taxi vehicle. You can't admit that, or you can't not admit that they're just a staple of South African roads currently and years gone by. The second is the BMW E30, which I think is actually on this list. It's a classic, lots of fun memories of that. And then last piece is the City Golf.
Catch Auto Central, SA's #1 motoring podcast, every Monday at 9 a.m.
Finding quick solutions is key to a great economic quarter. Use the Nando's app to order a quarter chicken with any single side for only 49 Rand in just 20 seconds. Nando's. Fire it up. T's and C's apply.
That's exactly right. Nando's are firing it up this morning, and so are Phumi and I. And we're going to be joined in a moment by Mighty Jamie, who's been on the show a couple of times. But Nando's are the people who bring you the Burning Platform every single week. It's your chance to catch up on what's going on in the world, what's going on in politics, what's going on in society. And I know you want to talk about Jacob Zuma, and we'll get to him in a moment. We've got Sipho Shezi joining us in just a short while. I'm delighted to welcome him to the show.
Gareth,
Yes.
I'm just going to go off and get him on and see if he's having trouble.
No problem.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start talking with Jamie, if you don't mind. So I'm going to get onto that. So let's get to Mighty Jamie, who I know has quite a lot to say about Eswatini, something we spoke about just a little bit earlier with JJ Cornish. And you are as interested in this story as just about anyone, Jamie. And I'm sorry that it seems to me that there are a lot of people who are just pretending that this is not happening right next door to us. Just trying to get you on the screen. I don't know why it's not working suddenly. Let's see if we can get Jamie on here. Just in case you don't know already, Mighty Jamie is a multi-award-winning international debating and public speaking champion and a coach. And he is also a guy who wants to talk to us this morning about Tigray and a bunch of other things. But we're going to speak principally about what's going on in the world of Swaziland, Eswatini, and find out what he thinks of that. So we'll speak to Jamie in a minute. Of course, we've got the Zuma story to talk about, and that is where Sipho Shezi will be talking with us a bit later. We'll speak about Carl Niehaus being banned, if that matters to anybody. We'll speak a little bit about what this means for the ANC, what they have to say, what they don't have to say, why Cyril has been so quiet, perhaps, because people are looking to him for something on this, you know. The Jacob Zuma Foundation has been addressing all of us as if that still is the main organ of concern. We haven't heard nearly as much from the president as we have from the former president. Hey, Jamie, how are you doing?
I'm well. Sorry, I just had a power outage. That's why you lost me for a moment, but I'm good.
Sorry, man. No, I'm sorry. That's just the reality.
Happened.
So listen, I've kind of teed this up for you because I know you're one of the few people who's talking about Eswatini. There seems to be like a blanket either disinterest or a real concerted misinformation campaign when it comes to Eswatini. You obviously are speaking to people in that country too. You're speaking to people you know in this country, and there are lots of dissidents in this country. We may even have the king living here in Johannesburg at the moment. Who knows? What can you tell us about the situation, and what can you tell us about your opinion on the situation?
Well, I mean, to put it bluntly, the first thing we need to understand is the real context of what is going on in Eswatini. We have effectively the monarchy, which is using its military to sustain its power at a moment where pro-democracy protesters are actually trying to undergo a revolution to achieve a democratic model of governance. So that's where we are in terms of the process, in Eswatini. So that's number one. Number two, we know for a fact that the army has used tactics that violate the African Charter for Human and People's Rights. They've shut down the internet, they've killed civilians, they've incarcerated activists unduly and unlawfully, and they have basically behaved in whatever manner they deemed, legitimate to make sure that they could keep the king in power, to make sure that they could suppress the pro-democracy movements and the pro-democracy moment. As you know, these revolutionary moments do happen almost spontaneously. And the African Charter recognizes people's legitimate right to rise up, fight, against a regime that they consider oppressive. And we are all clear that a monarchy is not an elected governance structure, it's an inherited governance structure, which is why the French did away with it, it's why the English did away with it, and it's why multiple systems across the world moved away from these monarchy-based systems where one person, by virtue of birth, aggregates all the benefits.
Absolutely, and I think it's bizarre that there are only two left in Africa, one in Morocco and one in Swaziland. But it seems to me that this fiefdom, which the king of Swaziland has been able to rule by decree for the longest time, hasn't really bothered people that much. They've mostly kind of just shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, this is part of what we have. Why is it not getting commensurate amounts of outrage in South Africa from ordinary South Africans? Why do we not care? This is a neighboring country. In fact, it's a country that hugely depends on us. They would not be able to survive if it weren't for borders with South Africa that were open, trade that was open, the kinds of relations that they have with our government. If our government said, guys, this is not acceptable, they'd be in a real situation. They'd have to make some very hard choices. But it seems the king is happier to turn guns on ordinary citizens than he is to be brought to book by our own government. Why are we as South Africans, so apathetic about it? And again, I'm going to reiterate this. If I sound like a broken record, please forgive me. But why is our media so nonchalant about it? Like it's not a big thing. They're not paying any attention to it.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer the questions in a structure, because there are three different interest groups that I think we need to delineate and look at separately. Number one is the general public. Number two is the media. And number 3 is the actual government and its foreign policy response. So when you start with the general public, what you'll find is that there's a lot of shared nationality between Eswatini and South Africa. There are a lot of Baswazi living in South Africa. There are many places where the language actually is quite prominently spoken. There's a lot of grassroots and on the ground concern. I'm yet to find any citizen, civilian, or person who says, oh, I saw those videos of the army shooting young boys and I don't care about that. It doesn't move me one way or another. So I think that what you'll find is the public that is aware of it, whether through social media, through proximity to the issue, or through just being interested in African affairs, that public actually is genuinely concerned about this particular topic. What I think you'll find at a media level is that this actually happened almost at an opportune time for King Mswati III, because there was a lot of local noise that would have distracted even a media that was very aggressively trying to pursue this particular issue. So what you'll find is that because of the 2 constitutional court judgments, the drama in Gandla, and several other local issues, that basically sucked up all the oxygen, because all that everyone wanted to hear about around the clock was Gandla. And unfortunately, that then took away the opportunity to educate those who are not necessarily abreast with this topic on the details of the topic, the longevity of the crisis, and the economic and socio-political risks that exist for the whole region as a result of this crisis. At a policy level, you asked me what I think ought to be done. I agree with you that South Africa has a large amount of influence in the region, and specifically on countries such as Eswatini and Lesotho and even Zimbabwe and Mozambique. And my view is that when you are a democracy, when you have constitutional principles that are entrenched in your constitution, principles such as life, principles such as liberty, and certain freedoms that we think are very important to protect, freedom of speech, political freedoms, freedom from being incarcerated wrongly, all of these freedoms are really entrenched and underscored by the Constitution. This is the value system that entrenches the democracy. When you are the custodian of those values, I actually believe that there's a moral duty to use whatever influence you can to try to spread those particular values in areas where they don't exist, especially if their absence oppresses people. So that's a moral point that I think. I think if you have a value and you uphold that value, you can't go into the playground and play with people who don't share that value or take any role. So, but beyond that, there is a legitimate and direct harm that exists when there's instability in your region. If there's terrorism in Mozambique, if there's a youth protesting and burning things in Eswatini, if there's a military brutal dictatorship in Zimbabwe, the outcomes of that are that many people will opt out of those unstable, impoverished areas and will take great pains to cross and go into places which have values that they believe in, economic opportunities that they think they can access, even though they're accessing scraps. We've seen people, get frozen, flying from Nigeria to the United Kingdom. We've seen people, travel from West Africa and East Africa through Libya, through a war zone, get into boats that are likely to sink, only on the mere hope that they can reach Turkey and possibly reach the United Kingdom and other countries like that. People have gotten frozen in the back of storage container trucks, simply trying to get to better countries. What is the lesson there? The incentives that exist at a human level, when you now have instability, poverty, violence, and all of these things, are so great that you do have a migration pressure that is created. So even if someone says, I don't think there's a moral duty, I don't think that person can also say, I don't think that we won't be affected by this particular issue.
So even though there is a moral duty, I would say South Africa has been very consistent in their non-participation. I mean, we watched Zimbabwe go to pot and nothing was done about it. And what's happening in Mozambique, there has been no intervention from the South African government. So South Africa is being consistent with their foreign policy of not participating and not intervening. Why are you
except for when we
that?
intervened in Lesotho that one time? But we did do an intervention. It was sanctioned by Nelson Mandela, and it was effective. And I think that we need to reconsider, because what has happened, and I think I didn't answer one of the other questions which is attached to this, is why do African leaders not have urgency with these issues? Number one, it's because of this chummy boys club that has been created at a diplomatic level. This idea that because we were all comrades and we're all fighting against, colonialism and apartheid, therefore there's no,
Jamie,
responsibility to call you out.
Can I just interject there that doesn't just happen international at a summit level between presidents. It also happens within the country. I mean, we saw even Becky Tele barricading about whether or not he was going to arrest Jacob Zuma. None of these guys actually take their job very seriously. It's more important for them to be in with their friends. And I see that happening in the Swazi situation, because we know the people are actually suffering. They have been suffering for years. That's undeniable.
Yeah.
And even if you don't care about that and you're just practical, as a government, you have to make some tough decisions. They don't want to make tough decisions against their friends.
Yeah, and it's a real issue, because it then leads to the outcomes that I think everyone can identify as being clear. I'll tell you, I used to host a little section of a Africa podcast on one of the other stations, and we were talking about the terror threat in Mozambique, I think 2 years ago, before there was any of the incidents that happened last year and this year. So I mean, I'd be in that conversation and say, I don't know why no one is worried that now we have a legitimate terror threat in SADC, and it's not an issue that we've had to deal with for a very long time. And we know what the impact of that can be. We've seen in the Sahel region, we've seen with Somaliland, Somalia, and Kenya, what terror can do in a region which is already fragile. So, I mean, considering how long some of these red flags and signs have been, and the writing's been on the wall, I mean, the literature, the political science literature on Eswatini has been calling it the slow and ignored crisis. I think for decades now, people have been trying to put it on the radar. So, I mean, it's quite frustrating to witness the approach that is taken at a foreign policy level, because of this boys club, this revolutionary WhatsApp group, and this idea that simply because a nation has sovereignty, that therefore means you must look away in all instances because sovereignty supersedes all things. But it's the state that has sovereignty, and the state is held by the people. It's not the politicians that have sovereignty. So if the people are now legitimately trying to wrest back power that they gave to politicians, it's the role of regional players to make sure that those people can have their legitimate aspirations re-expressed through the democratic instruments of the state. Because if you simply say, well, Mugabe has sovereignty, and you can clearly see that he no longer has the support of the will of the mass of the people, and it's ascertainable in many instances to be able to determine that, listen, this needs to now be resolved.
Jamie, I know Phumi's got questions too. Just from my side, you give us the short version of your thoughts on what happened in Nkandla. We can't pretend that that's not the biggest story that people want to hear from commentators and analysts like you. What's your takeaway on that whole situation? He's supposedly in jail at the moment, handed himself over at the 11th hour. Do you have any insights into how all of this was handled and how we should proceed going forward?
Well, I mean, I think I'll tell you that this is a victory for two things, right? At the very outset. Number one, it's a victory for the concept of the rule of law. And number two, it's a victory for the concept of constitutional supremacy. So why am I saying it's a victory for the rule of law? Because the fundamental principle of the rule of law is that we no longer have kings, and we're not going to be ruled by mobs either. So because we don't have kings and we're not going to be ruled by mobs, we're all going to be ruled by a common standard of rules. And those rules will apply equally to all without fear, without favor. So clearly, when there has been a contravention of a rule and that has been determined by a court, it's important then for that law to be seen to be applied, even when that person is important, even when they're a VIP in society. So I think in terms of looking at constitutional supremacy, in terms of looking at rule of law as two very important interests, I think that there are two clear wins in the goal basket, if you were to say, for those things. And I think long term, those are healthy points that need to be made by any democracy. That listen, you can go to jail if you're a president. You can go, the ruling of a court cannot be ignored or arbitrarily applied, etc. Or even you can't game the system to stay out of prison. So that is the legal view that I have on this particular matter. I'm not so sure if the social dynamics are such that there's going to be a win. What I'm seeing now is that this has now become a culture war moment. And the reason why I see it being a culture war moment is because there are multiple dynamics in the societal engagement with this issue. What do I mean by that? There are racial dynamics, there are tribal dynamics, there are class dynamics, and all of those things play into each other in different ways. So depending on which dynamic you prioritize, you may come out of this whole process feeling less than enthused, even though you appreciate that Jacob Zuma behaved in a very, very, reckless, offensive, stubborn manner. I think that it becomes a culture war issue. I think if we break it down, there are some people who are concerned about respectability globally, and it's not a South African concept. It's not a traditional concept. People will say George Bush may have done something in Iraq, but America is not going to arrest George Bush. The British will say Tony Blair may have done something that we don't agree with. We're not going to arrest Tony Blair. This is why you sometimes find that Bill Clinton, George Bush, even Barack Obama, all of these, national leaders of their home countries get treated with a certain approach.
Respectability, yeah.
Yes, and part of that, even though we don't wish to acknowledge it, is because states want to save face on the global stage. They don't want to necessarily have Putin and the Chinese saying, "Oh, look at how weak these guys are. Their leaders just get arrested every 2 seconds or whatever." So to posture themselves, I'm just saying.
That also works only in two ways. I mean, you make the mention of Putin. He had a very similar situation with Boris Yeltsin, and they came to an amicable agreement. If you think about Nixon, an amicable agreement, it works both ways. So both parties have to be willing. And here we have one party that was absolutely adamant that he would not take the fall. So,
well, you could be right, and I'm not sure what conversations would obviously have happened behind the scenes around, like, it's the guy did step down. Do you know what I mean? So maybe for the people who support Zuma, that was the fall, and this other stuff is now vindictive, because if you then say step down before your term ends, and the guy says okay, sharp, and then you do other things politically to marginalize his power and influence, people will say, okay, sharp, you're in charge now. But then if you then say, now we're sending you to jail, and we're sending you to jail under this dramatic set of events, I'm not sure that we will be able to move on from the cultural dynamics. And I think that's what's playing out in real time for us all to see. And part of it is this respectability stuff. But it's not the only thing that is here, right? Because other people have a view around justice, which is not anchored in legalistic analysis. Because sometimes what we'll have is you'll get a panel of lawyers coming in saying, well, this is the precedent, this is the standard, this is the rule, this is what happened, 1994, constitutional democracy, forget all the rest, let's move on. And then they forget that a special law was made to actually treat people outside of a criminal process. It was called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Act. A law was made to make sure certain people would never face criminal consequences for their actions. And people still remember that. In a constitutional democracy, you remember that one of the political parties took that issue to the Constitutional Court and said, actually, we don't think that this TRC process should be done because we want criminal sanctions for people who perpetrated crimes during apartheid. I can't remember right now which political party it was, but the name of the case is this political party versus president or something like that. And it was about the TRC. So what I'm trying to put across is there are people who are not going to look at this exclusively from the legal lens. And what they are going to see is that certain companies contributed to apartheid, international and local companies. They're going to know that there are certain key players in the apartheid regime who are members of the Nationalist Party, brazenly racist, brazenly pushing forward for the suppression, repression, and oppression of Africans within the apartheid regime, who now enjoy dignity. They have platforms, they have Nobel Peace Prizes, some of them. And those people are going to look at this and say, you've got two presidents who I can consider, or three, if you want to think about Botha. And some of these got treated one way, and this other guy, he got a different consequence.
That's a very valid comparison to make, because I do think, we tend to look at these things from a very tribal point of view. Like people, they can't help it. We defer to this. But at the same time, I'm really bothered by the fact that there's also a class of people, these politicians, whether it's Jacob Zuma or Botha or de Klerk or any of those, the politicians get kid glove treatment. And the rest of us, I mean, if you did something wrong, Jamie, there's no chance that you would negotiate, then you'd go to court. I mean, all of this costs huge amounts of money, which only politicians have. And usually they're using our money anyway. And then the police commissioner, then the minister of police, then you have a negotiation with this one comes for tea. We know how this works. These politicians get a different treatment to the rest of us. And maybe that also pisses people off. Even if you are, let's say, anti-de Klerk and pro-Zuma, or pro-Zuma and anti-Botha, or whatever it might be. What really is the distinction here is that the politicians still get better treatment, no matter what side they're on, than any of us ordinary folks.
Look, I think that is a moot point, and most people would agree that when you're dealing with these issues, you do see difference in access to legal systems. I mean, who can afford a team of lawyers? No ordinary citizen would be able to afford any of the litigation that was involved in many of these processes, and that's a given. I wouldn't even contest that myself. All I'm pointing out is that there's going to be here, I think, a protracted culture moment. And, sometimes things, they sizzle and sometimes they are a slow cook. So I'm not sure here we may see in terms of instability, in terms of political violence, in terms of ethno-nationalism, because I'm almost seeing a certain smugness. But maybe I'm only looking at certain areas. And that smugness to me seems premature, because there were a series of events that led to Wednesday playing out the way that it did. It almost looks as if no one in the Zuma camp expected them to follow through. Everyone thought that they had shown a strong amount of force, etc., etc. It almost felt as if Wednesday was very far removed from what we saw on Saturday and Sunday. So I'm not sure that all of the people who are of the viewpoint that they were going to, fight for this guy and, give their lives for this guy, all of a sudden, none of them care about this issue and this is the end of it. It may not be that they can do anything about this arrest, but it may be a re-emergence of certain ideas in certain quarters, ideas which we've tried to reduce in South Africa.
We know that KwaZulu-Natal is a hotbed for this kind of division, and that when that starts to happen, it does spill over into the rest of the country. Jamie, I'm going to let you go unless you've got anything else you want to ask Phumi, and then we can.
I'm very yeah.
Thank you for your time, Jamie.
You seem to have a lingering question, though, Phumi.
No, I don't. I really don't. I mean, it's fascinating to listen. It's fascinating to listen to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Obviously, these are my views, and people may not necessarily always agree with them. That's just how I'm seeing things as they play out. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, very good. Thank you, Jamie. Now, Pums, I know that you have had quite a lot to say about the story already, but we're going to perhaps go over the ground with a little more detail and some real analysis and interest here. We're going to speak to a man called Sipho Shezi. Let me tell you who he is, just in case you don't already know. He was the Director General of Public Works in Nelson Mandela's government. He founded the non-racial political organization called the DCO Matuwane Youth League in Edendale in Pietermaritzburg, which of course played an integral role in the formation of the UDF many years ago. He was educated at the University of Natal at Lancaster, Sussex, and Johns Hopkins University, respectively. He is a published author on politics and international relations. And we're going to talk to him this morning as someone who really does understand this stuff from a point of view that many people don't. Sipho Shezi will be with us in just a moment or two. But before we get to that, people are asking, what do you think? And if they didn't hear the first hour, Phumi was up until just after midnight last night watching all the drama unfold. Just give everybody a little insight as to what you were thinking while you were watching all of this happen.
I know for sure that there was no plan or strategy on the side of Jacob Zuma. I think all along they were hoping that this would fizzle, that he would get away with it. You know, that the threat of baring their teeth, the threat of having all those people out there. But even on the weekend, I remember saying to a friend of mine, all the people that were there on Saturday and Sunday were there on Saturday and Sunday. On Monday, they had to go back to work. On Monday, they had to go back. So even the number of people that you saw hanging out around the gates of Nkandla last night were a tiny fraction of the people that were there. I think there was a trying to make people feel like there's going to be some huge tribal schism that's going to happen here. And none of those things came to fruition. So, I mean, for me, I just think...
Do you see this in the way that Jamie sees it, that this could be a watershed moment and that there could be all kinds of new divisions brought in? It could be one of those moments where South Africa has to take stock of itself and we divide along ethnic, tribal, or party lines again? Or is it just the ultimate collapse of the ANC, which you've been predicting for a very long time?
I think we're seeing the ANC at the end of it. It's the end of the ANC. I really do.
And this is how it's going to end, with this division between Jacob Zuma and the rest of the party.
I don't think it's going to end because of Jacob Zuma and the division of the rest of the party. I think it's simply because it has been a long time coming. There's so many things that have been happening. And I mean, I think the long time coming is people who have put themselves ahead of the program of the party, people who've put themselves ahead of the program of the country.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the fruits of that harvest, which people, whether it was Jacob Zuma and the Guptas or Pule Mabe or Ace Mahashule, or you know, I mean, you can carry on naming these people. And that's what it is. They have put their own interests ahead of the interests of the party. And that's what we're seeing.
Rowan, who's listening to us, is saying this man was found in contempt of court, plain and simple. He must face the trial for his corruption and fraud. And this comment from Rowan is even for mass genocide. Look, I don't know about genocide, but certainly the fraud and corruption and what might have resulted from that is definitely in his hands. But that's not what this arrest was about. People must also not try to conflate issues here. He's going to jail because he's in contempt of court for not appearing at the Zondo Commission. That's essentially what it is. And his lawyers did him no favors in this respect, or maybe they were just following his instructions by being as
whether he was badly advised, or if he is a bad client.
Yes.
Whatever it is of the two of those things, I think he was, and I think at the end there, even on, I think it was on Sunday that he came out to see the masses, you could see in the eyes of the man that he really has his back against the wall. Last night, I did not see the whole interview between JJ Tabane and Mzwanele Manye. But again, you know, Mzwanele making bad decisions, always jumping on as the women and children. Somebody said he jumps on the sinking ship as the women and children are being lifted off. You know, whether it's ANN7, whether it's ATM, now he's the spokesperson of Jacob Zuma. The whole thing is just... it's a mess.
If there's ever anybody who really makes, I mean, you think Carl Niehaus is bad, but honestly, Jimmy Money, like that guy can't make a good decision, right? It's unbelievable.
And just, you know, and then what it also has laid bare is you see why, as a professional, you should keep your political your political leanings to yourself. I mean, the whole time we're watching Dalimpofu be the black excellence, as they say it, that is representing. And at the same time, this is a person who is part of a party that has been calling for the jailing of Jacob Zuma, for the bringing to book of Jacob Zuma for years. And now he's the person trying to keep him out of jail. I'm just like, this thing is so messy. You know, this last night, seeing Julius Malema tweeting that this is a sad day.
Oh, right. So make up your mind. You were the one who was calling for him to pay back the money, to go to jail. You even said there's that famous clip going around of Julius he's going to go to jail. Now he's going, it's a sad day. Like, I can tell you, the EFF and in the persons that you've just mentioned, Dalimpofu and Julius Malema, it seems to me that their posturing now makes them almost incredible. And I don't mean incredible as in fantastic. I mean incredible as in not having very much credibility when it comes to their actual point of view on things. Because these two men have been vacillating between supporting this guy. And look, I understand that
and those flip-flops are Vianas.
I understand that Dalimpofu is an advocate and that he also represents his clients. And sometimes he doesn't agree with his clients. But in this case, he's played out so many cards that we actually don't know whether to take him seriously or not. All right, it seems like Sipho Shezi is here, and I'm very pleased to welcome him to the show. Yes. Hello, Mr. Shezi. How are you? Sipho, how are you?
Gareth. How are you doing? I'm okay,
Good.
Gareth.
Thank you
how
so
are
much.
you doing?
Great. Thank you for being on the
Great,
show this morning and for joining us to talk about this obviously huge news.
I must say, I must say that I don't feel very comfortable being on the show with you and Phumi because I know that the two of you are troublemakers and I'm not one of those.
You are not a troublemaker.
No, if you're the troublemaker, then we need more of you in our world. So who knew that we'd been asking for more trouble? Maybe Phumi and I are onto something. So let's just talk about this whole situation. What is your view on what's just happened in the last 12 hours? What's your view on what happens from here? We had another analyst on just now who was saying he sees this as a moment of division. Phumi said just now she sees it as the moment of final destruction for the ANC. And there are very many varied opinions across the board about what's actually happened here. What is your take? Oh, as I ask him that, he's just gone.
Did we lose him?
We've just lost him. Damn.
So do you think that now that Jacob Zuma, while we try and get him back online, do you think that now Jacob Zuma is gone, we're finally going to see the VPS scandal take care of Julius and his crowd?
I don't think so, Pums. I don't think that's... There's no political urgency there. Here he is. Sorry, you're back. So what's your take on all of this?
I'm back here.
Yeah.
But I've done last couple of hours looking at the level of euphoria, in the country about the developments that have happened, and I'm not excited at all. I think that we are beginning to see the commencement of a major political crisis in the country. And I think that is reminiscent of what is going to be reminiscent of what we saw in the mid 80s into the 90s. All that is happening now. Some people can be excited about the fact that, we're seeing the triumph of constitutionalism, we're seeing the triumph of the rule of law, and the scary thing for me is that it's all happening in a vacuum. It's happening in a situation where there is a serious leadership vacuum in the country. And I dare say that most people are even scared of talking about it. And I looked at what happened on Saturday with all, again, the excitement that was going on. I looked at it and I was saying, all this is happening in the context of, just political vacuum, just a leadership vacuum, in the country. In the context of KZN, it expressed itself, much more pronouncedly than anywhere else. In the context of the leadership of the country, it happened.
So Sipho, first of all, do you think Do you think this whole thing could have been handled better? Is there a different way you would have liked things to unfold?
Yes, Gareth. For a very long time, I've been saying, to people, what is the issue that we're dealing with in this country at the moment? We're dealing with a situation where political problems, particularly political problems in relation to the ANC, are being outsourced to various constitutional structures, whether it's the judiciary or some form of either chapter 9 institutions or some kind of commissions. And my view has been that the only way to manage these things is that in particular the ruling party, the ANC, must actually manage these things in-house. The same thing applies with reference to the Zuma issue and everything that surrounds it. Even if at the end of the day you have to say you allow the legal process to kick in, but I think that there is some serious political management that should have been done.
Well, doesn't it then fall? Can't we place the responsibility for that squarely at the feet of Jacob Zuma? If he'd handled and conducted himself better in respect of this, then perhaps they wouldn't have had to go to these lengths. But this is not a political issue now. There are political ramifications, but essentially it's a legal issue. He and his legal team have put him in the way of the law, and we cannot have a country where the law is disregarded just because there are dangerous political consequences, surely.
Gareth, can I just throw one question to you? What would you say if Jacob Zuma were to say now, I didn't go to the commission because I was protecting the ANC? What would you say? What would you say if Jacob Zuma says, notwithstanding all the drama, fact of the matter is, I really mean it to say, I don't mind going to jail. I've just gone to jail right now, and I really meant it. But the reason why I didn't want to go to the commission is because I was protecting the ANC. And at the end of the day, if it means that
your decisions, and if his decisions have taken him to jail, then that's his problem.
I want to talk about the leadership vacuum. I want to talk about the issue of a leadership vacuum. And you made a very chilling for me proposition that we are in the same situation as we were in the 80s leading up into the 90s, which saw unprecedented turmoil in our social fabric. People in KZN, it happened much more than anywhere else in the country, and it really only became national news when we saw Buipatong, when we saw what happened in the East Rand. And then it was ANC versus IFP, as it were, and a third force. And now it looks like it's an ANC versus ANC, even when Mangosuthu comes out in his statement to say this is not a threat to the Zulu people, this is a threat to one individual. But if there is a leadership vacuum, there's a new king in KZN who is, for all intents, it appears he is not very strong because he's not keeping his regiments in line. There is, in the ANC and KZN, ructions, and in the ANC as a political party, as the ruling party, there are factions, and we can see this. Is this going to lead, in your view, to something similar to what we did see in the early 90s, in the end of the 80s and the early 90s, where there is instability and violence, where people are dying on the streets?
Phumi, I think that that's really where we headed if this situation is not managed properly. Let me just expatiate on that, and recast a bit the previous experience. Prior to the last round of constitutional negotiations in the country, the KZN, in particular the Midlands, didn't want the ANC to go into those negotiations. And in order to deal with that, Nelson Mandela went down to Pietermaritzburg in the Natal Midlands. He called all the ANC leaders, including Harry Kwala, Jacob Zuma, and everybody else, and said to them, this is the reason why we have to do it. He spent about 3 hours giving a lecture to that leadership. And at the end of that leadership, was with Watasi Sulu, and they said, do you agree that this is what we needed to do? And everybody in the boardroom said, yes, Mr. President, this is what we need to do. The point I'm making, Phumi, is that, at that level, you would have expected that to have happened. So you would have expected, the leader of the ANC to go down to KZN, call all the key leaders of the ANC and say, listen here, this is what is about to happen. We have seen the picture unfold. Unfortunately, JZ did not play ball with the judiciary, and this is what is going to happen. And therefore, I would expect you to respect that position. That did not happen.
And that's such a good point.
Can he do it anyway?
His silence has been deafening. I mean, we haven't heard a sound from the president. He said he's looking over the court's ruling. I mean, there's not much to look over. It's not complicated.
No, Gareth, there is not much to look for. It's not complicated. But over and above that, beyond being the president of the country, the president is the president of the ruling party. He's the president of the ANC. In a situation where the provincial leader of the ANC in KZN is weak as he is, we would have expected the president to actually chip in and take a hands-on. That he did not do. That is very worrying. If you look at how Chief Mangobusuthu Buthelezi has come across, I'm still sitting back and say, given the dynamics in the Zulu royal family right now, are we not seeing the same situation that we saw, in the mid-80s, where what Chief Mangobusuthu Buthelezi was saying was not necessarily a holistic view of the Zulu royal family, and it's highly likely that could be the case, right now. So that's where I'm coming from, Gareth, and from when I say that this thing is happening under conditions of leadership vacuum in the country, and it's a very worrying phenomenon.
Can the ANC come back from this, do you think, with the leadership that they currently have?
Objectively, I have got serious doubts that the ANC is going to come back from this. I've said to a number of people that you cannot caricature the ANC without taking into account the significance of KZN. And right now, I can say without any fear of contradiction that it's going to be an uphill battle for the current leadership of the ANC to pull together the ANC in KZN. And if the ANC in KZN is not together, I wonder what that is going to mean for the stability of the country. Those are cold.
Sipho, there's this. You've just highlighted something that's such a big problem, and I think people aren't looking at the big picture here because we're all so engrossed in the Jacob Zuma story, and it's he's like Donald Trump. He sucks up all the oxygen, and then all it is about him. But we're looking at KwaZulu-Natal at the moment. We've got a weak provincial leader in KZN, as you've pointed out. We've got a weak president in terms of his getting involved in KZN. We've got Jacob Zuma, who is going to manipulate this to his own ends, even if it's symbolic and even if going to jail is for him a card that he can play because he's done this before. He's a very clever man. We've got the Zulu royal family who are in some disarray because we've had, a huge amount of tragedy there in a very short space of time. And we've got a country and a province in KZN that's under lockdown rules. So people are desperate. Things are very, very fraught. There are huge amounts of consternation and difficulty happening all over the province. Who is going to step up and take control of KwaZulu-Natal? It's up for grabs at the moment, isn't it?
Well, Gareth, let me just simply add to that, Gareth, that you also have got a national leadership, people who are in deep trouble because of all sorts of malfeasance that they've been involved with, who are going to rally behind Jacob Zuma for their own expediency. And they are looking at KZN as a seedbed on which they're going to launch themselves. You also have in KZN local leadership of the ANC, which is least interested about what is currently going on in terms of whether it is wrong or right, all that they're interested in, they're just simply positioning themselves because they want to be councillors. And those who feel that they're being elbowed, they're actually killing each other. So that is the level of instability that we have. And to reinforce the point that we just picked up on, Gareth, is that it's not just simply the stability that you can turn your back, on. It has got serious ramifications for the country. So, yes, you're right, KZN is up for grabs. At the moment. The unfortunate thing is that we haven't seen any serious political force that can actually come in and take advantage of that and harness this kind of situation. So it goes back to the issue of political vacuum that I've been saying. Whilst everybody is excited about what is going on, I sit here and actually say we are headed for a serious crime.
I have been in a lot of trouble with a lot of our listeners because I keep saying that we have no opposition parties. You say that KZN. So I hear the view that the ANC machinations, there are many people trying to position themselves, trying to use the disarray in KZN as a political launchpad to get themselves to the top of the party list. But I wonder then, is it also up for grabs for other political parties? Does the DA have an opportunity there? Does the EFF have an opportunity there? Could the IFP make a comeback?
Well, I don't think so. I think that all these parties, without exception, with the ANC at the apex of the moment, they don't have the opportunity to actually mold, the KZN political scenario and take advantage of it. My view is that it's actually going to take a new sober voice to actually do that. And in my opinion, that sober voice will have to talk about the interest of South Africa Inc. And therefore begin to really talk about, the mobilization of civil society, from the grassroots, not from the boardrooms, and that is what, in my opinion, is going to take. Even, the Protect South Africa Democracy Movement, and it will not be in a position to try to mobilize that situation. You need a different, kind of player who really understands the dynamics of that environment to put it together.
Does the tribalism that we have been seeing a lot of, does it really hold as much water as people seem to think? There has been a lot of, it's the Zulus that are on the side of Jacob Zuma, seeing the regiments showing up for Jacob Zuma and seeing that it is in the seat of KZN, all of this. Does the tribalism that is rearing its head here have something for us to look at and be worried about, especially because South Africa is a very divided still, politically, racially, and tribally?
Phumi, why did Madiba leave the ANC behind when he got out of prison and went straight to the royal family and went straight to Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi? The ANC only pays Madiba to do that, but otherwise the ANC nationally and also in the province was not necessarily in favor of that. Madiba did that because he understood the importance of the tribal factor in the South African political milieu. And when you talk about the importance of the tribal factor in the South African political milieu, you need to situate the centrality, of the Zulu and the Nguni people right at the heart of that. So it's not something to be taken lightly. It is something to be taken very, 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 very seriously.
You're the first person, Sipho, you're the first person who's actually acknowledged that. I'm so glad Phumi asked the question, because most people are too nervous even to ask the question. We play this game in South Africa where we pretend we're the rainbow nation some of the time. We also pretend that tribal differences don't exist. We also pretend that people aren't tribal. And then suddenly we're at the same time thrilled to see all the culture of the Zulu kingdom on display, with the monarch being enthroned and the old monarch being buried and all of these things. And people take both of these points of view, and they manage to hold them both in their heads at the same time without acknowledging that there might be some dissonance there. And I think it's such an important point. Like the Zulu nation, because it is a nation, is a very important part of the South African political scene, and they must be taken seriously, or you ignore them at your peril. I remember that the biggest issue leading up to our elections back in 1994 wasn't about racial harmony. It wasn't about opposition parties in general. It was about the IFP and the ANC. And the IFP in that case was a stand-in, really, for the interests of the Zulu people. And that was the most important and significant political activity that was going on prior to our elections. We mustn't underplay this and pretend everything's okay when under the blanket there's a whole lot of nonsense.
Gareth, you're so right. I mean, again, just going back to Madiba to illustrate my point. Why does Madiba makes Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi the acting president when it was such a sensitive issue at that stage for him to do? And when Madiba had a whole range of people in that cabinet that he could have made them acting president, Madiba was doing that because he was actually consolidating this element. Whilst in the past, people might say we successfully dealt with tribal chauvinism in our environment, I am saying now, apartheid is now gone, which was the common rallying factor.
You've made me think of something. Can I ask you this then? Jacob Zuma is one of the people who's claimed to have had a lot to do with making sure that there was a degree of harmony in KwaZulu-Natal, certainly in making sure that the ANC had a much more broad and wide range of support in KwaZulu-Natal. Do you believe that Jacob Zuma is still the man who can broker a kind of peace between the ANC in the rest of the country and the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, and also between the various factions within KwaZulu-Natal, as a Zulu man who occasionally claims to be one of the most traditional people that there is, who follows all the traditional rules, who's paid his respects to the monarchy in whichever way he has. But I don't know if he isn't also a creature of opportunity. How much of a role do you think he could still play, and how much of that power and responsibility has he assumed for himself without actually deserving it?
No, I think my view that in that context, Gareth, I think that, Jacob Zuma in that context is a spent force, now, and to be quite honest, to be brutally honest, I think that Jacob Zuma is himself right now, whether intentionally or unintentionally, an expression of affection. So I think that his political capital in the context in which we are raising has become narrower and narrower. My view is that you need a much more, credible character, to actually deal with that kind of aspect in KZN.
Does anybody have that credibility at the moment?
Goes back to the issue I was raising, Phumi, that what is currently happening in KZN right now, it's happening in the context of a political vacuum. I think that those that might have hoped that somebody like, for instance, Zweli Mkhize, could, fit into that depth, they must also realize that also that political currency right now has gone under the bridge. And so I think we still need to actually cross our fingers and pray 24/7 that history is going to deliver us that character that could do it. But the point I'm making is that it is not only KZN that needs that character. I think it is the country that needs that character, because without the stability of the KZN, you're not going to have the stability of the country. And that is where, in my opinion, we're heading.
It sounds like the lyrics to a Bonnie Tyler song. We need a hero. We're holding out for a hero. And I don't know that person's going to come. But Sipho Shezi, it's very good to have you on the show. No, it's a great pleasure to host you, and I hope we'll see you again. You want to throw in a last word, yes?
No. Thank you very much. I was just simply saying that you put it very, very well. I think that what we really need in the country right now, we need somebody to raise his hand.
Yeah, and listen, if that person is the wrong person and people still rally behind him, that's our own fault. That's us as a people who must take the blame for whatever happens. Of course, there are opportunities, but there are also opportunists, and the two don't always go together well for whoever's on the receiving end, right, Pons?
If you hear that, well, we need somebody to raise his hand. I have been saying it. We are the people that must stand into the gap, guys. Every single one of us. We have something that we can give, and if we want our country to succeed, we all have to be part of it, and we all have to pay the price.
Absolutely. All right, Sipho, I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of the day. Phumi, please enjoy the rest of your birthday, and we will see you tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, bright and early. Happy birthday, Phums.
Thanks, darling.